club, much less everybody in the entire Democratic Party of the United States. That being possible. I think that what you'll see here tonight is that our political spectrum is a little bit more messy and a little bit less clear than maybe we were all thinking of us. So, first and foremost, I am in favor of market-oriented solutions to solving this healthcare and health insurance malaise that we are seeing in our country. For too long, we have watched insurance companies and hospitals gouge our consumers and our patients. So what I want to do is empower these patients, not the corporations. I want to be as cost-effective as possible in our solutions, which is why we need to be smart when it comes to spending. And it's why I primarily will advocate for policies that won't grow our national debt. I want to work for a system that empowers our patients by increasing the number of people who can access healthcare that is both high quality and quickly accessible. No long wait times here. I look forward to discussing this issue further. I look forward to discussing the idea of maybe capping the increases of premiums on our patients by health insurance companies. And I also would like to float the idea of providing patients with the ability, empowering them to have access to their own medical records, which would break up local hospital monopolies and really change the definition of healthcare networks. How many of you here today are actually buying two different healthcare plans? One that's provided for back home and one that you have to pay for to access Cardinal Healthcare. Yeah, quite a few of us. There's a lot of lapse in coverage that we can't access because we may be from different states. So those are a couple of ideas that I want to express here tonight. I look forward to discussing this further with my peers. Thank you.
General discussion portion of the debate. We will also be having delegates sent around to collect note cards with questions that we have them at this time for after the general discussion. So to start, you guys have all looked and asked each other questions, but we just wanted to start off with a question for all of you, saying what is the fiscal impact of your plans and what will your strategy be to offset those fiscal impacts? Yes, please.
So I think that the core of what I'm talking about is opening up the market so that there's actually competition and prices actually mean stuff, so that when you walk into a hospital, Band-Aids are $500, but that there's lots of people trying to supply those Band-Aids and you're able to go after those with your own dollars. The reason why the current system is so expensive, or rather why these regulations are in place, is because legislators don't want to be seen taxing and spending. So they require emergency rooms and hospitals to provide care regardless of someone's ability to pay, which is a noble intent, sure, but what that ends up happening is that they have to create all these competition restrictions. Because if you are requiring places to give free charge, or to give free care, you have to overcharge other customers. But your customers who are paying customers aren't going to be overcharged if they can get fleeced off to another provider. So what ends up happening is this system where prices mean literally nothing. They're cross subsidies. They're economically equivalent to raising taxes and providing subsidies for the poor, but they totally kill innovation in the system. So I think the fiscal impact would be positive if we allow free market to bring forward what we get from other industries. Thanks.
So, I'm of the belief that we have really yet to explore every option available to us out there, particularly when it comes to the options that will save our government money and saving consumers money as well. So that's why I am very much supportive of market-oriented options where we can regulate things like premiums and deductibles to cut down on the price gouging that we're seeing with insurance companies. As far as funding programs, new subsidized programs like Medicare for All or one similar to it, I would like to see increases on capital gains tax. It's a little bit tangential to this debate, so we don't have to debate capital gains tax or income taxes. However, I do think that increasing taxes on capital gains would be a pretty cost-effective way of affording subsidized healthcare for the United States.
Okay. Yes, all right. So ultimately, I think what's important about the healthcare reform policy that we choose to implement is we first have to acknowledge what it is that made healthcare insurance wrong in the first place. This is a problem where the Affordable Care Act missed, and it's definite and it's imperatively missing from a lot of these socialist solutions, and that's the fact that as a consumer, when you're paying into a system of insurance where you don't know, where you're not aware of the cost that you're paying for. So, and what that does is that implements what this overconsumption of healthcare, or Medicare, that's called that's called moral hazard spending. And the problem is the fact that, given our current healthcare system, we didn't address that in the Affordable Care Act. And so the solution to addressing those issues is you want to equip consumers to consider costs when they're paying again for their Medicare. And so you want to do that by incentivizing high deductible plans and health savings accounts, which we can follow individuals regardless of their employer, and they equip consumers to consider costs. They help, and then we want to remove premiums and stuff.
Yeah, so I think obviously with Medicare for All, we can't shy away from, we can't run away from the fact that yes, this program would cost a lot of money. But the fact of the matter is, healthcare in America already costs too much for most people. And as I stated earlier, the overall cost of the American healthcare system would go down due to administrative shortcuts and various other factors under a Medicare for All system. But I think most importantly, the average American would pay less for their healthcare. And the mechanisms through which we would pay for Medicare for All directly, there's a wide variety. I agree with my colleagues at the Dems that closing capital gain tax loopholes is good, and also progressive income taxes and various other ways of moving the money that's already being spent on healthcare into a government-run system.
Thank you. So our next question that we'd like to pose to you is, do we, the United States, have a moral obligation to provide health care to everyone as needed, or is health care something that is a commodity and should be subject to the same marketplace influences as other commodities? So we want to start the other way. Yeah.
I think that the United States has, and really any country, has a complete obligation to provide health care for its citizens, for its residents, not just because of the argument from a collective health of the society and perspective, but also from a deep perspective of individual freedom and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Health has to be an integral part of that, because in the real world, practically, so many people, many more in this country than really any other similar country, people are burdened by questions of health, whether they're long-term illness, stuff like that, or it's due to medical debt from dealing with their issues. It is in a just society, people would not be saddled with that kind of medical debt, and people would not, and health would be the concern of the society as a whole for the sake of the freedom of each of its individual members.
All right, so firstly, the question we have to ask again is healthcare a right or not? And firstly, if healthcare is a right, then why isn't water? Why isn't food or electricity? Before you go on and calling something a right, you first need to have a standard for why it is one. If food isn't a right, it's more of a necessity, I think, than even healthcare, then why is it? Ultimately, this is because healthcare is not a right because rights are not created by the government. Rights are transcendent truths grounded in the principle that everyone is created equal, and that therefore every single individual is inherently entitled to right to life, liberty, and property, not happiness, though we kind of all wish it were. And it is the role of the government to then enforce these rights. Ultimately, healthcare is not a negative liberty because ultimately the right to life is the right not to be killed. The government doesn't ultimately have responsibility to keep you alive, but can you imagine what that responsibility would be if it would? Like preventing death from old age due to natural causes. And ultimately what you see though with healthcare is that ultimately the only way you get it as a right is through slavery and coercion, by stealing the fruits of other people's labor, and we see that by stealing premiums and raising. Yeah.
Every year, thousands of students go to medical school, and they cite that reason because they want to help. That's why they want to become doctors, nurses, people who provide health care to the people who are in need. And I don't think we're doing a good enough job of actually transferring that into homeless people. We have homeless individuals who are dying in the streets of big cities, especially during big cold waves like the ones that we just saw in the Midwest. And those people really see healthcare as a necessity for their life. So yeah, I am personally in favor of treating it as a right. Again, I can't speak for every single person in the organization, but I view it as a right, and I think that everyone does have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and Can't do that if you're dead.
So I think I have somewhat of an unconventional answer to that question for a conservative. Do we have a right to our fellow person? That's kind of the question we're asking. But government doesn't have responsibilities. People have responsibilities. This building doesn't have responsibilities. We in this room have responsibilities. And the relevant question is how we can most effectively carry out that responsibility to our fellow people. And I think every lesson of history, every lesson of economic analysis tells us that there's a trade-off between creating disincentives to work, disincentives to investment, disincentives to innovation, and with price controls, with providing help to the poor. What we should do is gut all the anti-competitive laws that allow for healthcare monopolies that keep foreign doctors out of the US, provide on the books, on budget care to those who need it, and also create incentives for innovation as we do in every other industry.
Thank you.
For our next question, we'd like to know if an individual does not want health insurance, what is the government's responsibility in providing them or not providing them with health insurance? We'll start on this side.
So the kind of care that I'm talking about is something probably analogous, the kind of care for the poor that I'm talking about is something like the VA. We unfortunately, just as a fact, we can't afford to provide private jet medicine to everyone. We can afford to pay for something that is a subsistence insurance, basically. And we should provide it, and we should make that an option. But I'd also question what kind of paternalism it is at the point then that if someone would rather spend their money on entertainment, on their family, on whatever they get utility enjoyment out of, why we should force them to spend their money on premiums and on healthcare. I think that's an interesting moral question.
Now, I think that this question really gets at the heart of an issue that I told the Standard College Republicans will raise, and that is about the individual mandate that accompanied the Affordable Care Act. The fact of the matter is that without an individual mandate, we will have individuals who game the system, and we will end up having what is called a death spiral in our health insurance markets. And to explain what death spiral is, that is when there are too many people who are unhealthy in a health insurance market who are taking more out of the market than there are people who are healthy, who are paying into the market and taking out less. And if we have this death spiral, aka we don't have an individual mandate, aka we aren't forcing people to have health insurance and to patronize health insurance companies, then what we'll see is that consumers, corporations, hospitals, doctors, nurses, everyone who works in those hospitals, they will all suffer.
Ultimately, the question that we have to ask is the question of honoring a person's individual liberty. I mean, even carrying back to like even the discussion we had about whether or not healthcare is a right. Rights don't infringe upon other people's rights. And if we're going to provide healthcare by stealing the fruits of their labor for services that they certainly don't want to pay, like why should I be forced to buy health insurance or pay higher premiums because of the fact, like through no fault of my own, by living a healthy lifestyle, for example. And because this is ultimately money that people need. And yeah.
I think the very framing of this question reflects one of the problems with the American healthcare system. Because the question should not be about, oh, should someone be forced to pay for insurance or should someone not be forced to pay for insurance? The debate about healthcare needs to move beyond the question of just insurance towards a question of health and access to care provided. And what Medicare for All would do and would basically make it not even really, would basically mean that people don't have to make a conscious choice to take a healthcare plan or to have a healthcare plan or not. They would just be covered no matter what. And I think a lot of people, and maybe logically, would choose not to have health insurance. But accidents happen. And the way that Medicare for All is set up, those people, even in case of accidents, would be covered.
Great. So going on with that, our next question. Like our presenters did a great job at the beginning of this tonight, saying healthcare is typically measured in 3 three central ways: quality, cost, and coverage. And they're all very inextricably linked. But with that being said, which of these three tools in measuring healthcare do your and your platforms think is most important? And if you had to shape the other two based on it, why? So we're going to start with the inside out. So we'll start with SCR, move outward, outward.
Well, see, it's ultimately a question of, again, and this ultimately addresses the question of like why healthcare spending is so expensive in the U.S. And that's ultimately because, again, as a nation, we value innovation, and that's why 64%, again, of all the world's drugs were approved in the U.S. in 2015. It's why 45 out of all 45 drugs which entered into the market in 2015 were approved in the U.S. first, whereas in the U.K. you only had 14, or in Canada it was only 17. The fact of the matter is that the reason why healthcare is expensive is because of the fact that we have all these innovations, the latest quality treatment. It's why your healthcare outcomes for a lot like hypertension and cancer are significantly higher in the US than they are in the UK. So we want to focus on making sure that that quality care is available to other individuals, and that's an economic solution. It isn't a question of the healthcare quality.
Yeah.